Starting. Okay, we're live.
Wait, are you live streaming this?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
All right. So you can go ahead and give your opening cases for single-payer healthcare.
Oh, me?
Yeah.
Okay. So, I support a single-payer healthcare system. I believe that no matter what your income is, you should have access to high-quality healthcare.
Okay.
And that really sums it up, and I can get into more statistics after you guys go with your opening statements.
I find it interesting. You talked about the quality of care a little bit. I have some stats here. In countries with the universal right to healthcare, certain disease treatment outcomes are worse than the United States. The U.S. 5-year survival rate for all cancers are higher by about 15% compared to Europe. They also have a higher 5-year survival rate than Canada. The studies have found U.S. cancer screening rates are higher than those in Canada, which obviously prevention is way bigger. They also have more prevention in 10 European countries, including France, Germany, Sweden, and Switzerland. They have the highest prostate and breast cancer survival rate in the world. They have the highest survival rate after stroke with age-adjusted 30-day fatality rate, which is lower than the OECD average, as well as heart attack, which I think is saying something considering the way Americans eat.
Okay, well, okay, here's some things I got. So, America, compared to a lot of industrialized nations with universal healthcare, has a lower, okay, I forgot what I was going to say. What was it? Oh, a lower life expectancy. Whereas in the US, it's 79, and a lot of other European countries are in the 80s, also having a higher infant mortality rate than many nations with a universal healthcare system.
Well, one thing about that is we're also, wide stats that are the most annoying about America is that we have such a more diverse population than any other country. Like most of Europe is full of Europeans and predominantly white
recently
Europeans.
There's been a lot more migrants coming there from the Middle East.
But I mean, for the most part, like you get like education in America, you get healthcare, and like you get all these stats, but we don't have this like universal. We have such a broad. We're a boiling point. So I mean, that kind of stat is one of those that I dislike because of how it is in a sense. So I don't know about all of that.
Okay. Anyone else have anything to say?
I have a few other, I guess, issues with the healthcare as well. What's your opinion on spending and the amount that it would cost for a nation as big as the United States?
Spending, well, what do you mean by that?
Well, you're going to have to pay for it.
Well, okay, so I would say increase taxes, well, primarily for the wealthy to fund a single-payer Medicare for all health system.
Okay, we can get into that.
Mainly because of
income
inequality.
That's another topic we're going to hit on. I do have some stats here about the spending, including the Medicaid, which are government programs, which help with healthcare.
Yep.
At one point, they were 10% of the federal budget, which was in 1985. But by
and now they're like the biggest part.
Yeah.
So obviously, I know a lot of on the left would claim that military space power 54%, but that's not true. It's only that's only discretionary spending. When you actually look at the entire budget, it's only 16%, and Medicare and Medicaid are the biggest part.
Yeah, exactly. And
but another thing about spending is that if you actually look at the healthcare spending per capita, the U.S. is significantly higher than countries that have a universal system. So I have some stats on that.
The thing with that,
I can read the exact thing.
The United States is such a big economy, where
well, yeah, but this is per capita.
Well, even then, we're a wealthy country as well.
So here we go. This is from Vox, which definitely does have a liberal bias, but still
we spend
source.
more like on entertainment.
Well, this is
example for per capita because
healthcare spending as a percentage of GDP. The United States having the largest at 17.7%. Then you got the Netherlands, 11.9, France 11.6, Canada 11.2, 22, Japan 9.6, United Kingdom 9.4, and OECD average 9. 3, Finland 9, and then there's a couple other countries. I won't say them all, but
Yeah,
so generally the U.S. spends more per capita.
The United States spends
Okay,
a lot
4%.
on most stuff. In terms of the spending too, I also have a Congressional Budget Office report, and the Obamacare insurance basically increased the federal deficit between 340 and 700
Well,
billion
the
for
thing
first
is, when
2
Obama
years.
got in, he actually the deficit has gone down under Obama.
Well, the deficit
Well,
is different than the
but-
debt. The
Well,
deficit
yeah, the
is
debt has increased, but the rate in which the debt is increasing has slowed.
Well, specifically,
well, yeah, because you were. Go ahead, sorry.
specifically referring to healthcare and Obamacare, this is what the Congressional Budget Office report. They also predict that within the second 10 years, it'll actually go up 1.5 trillion. And obviously, if you had a universal right for everybody, that would go up even higher. So I
Well,
think there is some spending.
if you can be entirely paid through tax increases,
But it
then
We'll
can
get
it,
into that
like
prevent.
we're already the most taxed nation in one of the most taxed nations in terms of like every aspect. And
I didn't want to throw like my tax stats out yet, but the taxes are already significantly higher than most of the rest of the world.
and the more you raise taxes, again we're kind of branching off from healthcare into the tax part, but the more you
Well, it
raise
slows
taxes,
economic growth.
not only that, it also
Well, the thing
dissuades
is, hold on, but
population.
but if you increase taxes and provide a universal health and use it to fund a universal healthcare system, a lot of people will be able to off out of their health insurance. So
Well, yeah, but I mean, increasing taxes in general, especially for like a healthcare driven, is how you drive out population. You can look at taxing powerhouses like California and New York have net a decrease in population size because of how many people are leaving the state.
I don't really know if that's true, but
Oh, hold on, let's let me pull it up.
Yeah, if you want to go ahead and get into it, another issue I have is what's your opinion on the wait times associated with the universal
well,
right?
I've looked at multiple different countries, and there's some countries such as Canada that have higher wait times than the U.S., and other countries such as, it really can depend, but particularly the UK that actually has lower wait times than the U.S. So here's one stat that I have: percent of people waiting 6 days or more to see a doctor 1/6. The United States is little under 20, and only 3 countries are actually higher, which is Sweden, Norway, and Canada, and then many countries are lower, such as France, Germany, Australia, UK, the US.
So there's 2 things I want to get into before I get into this.
In terms of that, there's a couple. I have a couple more on.
Right. So 2 things I want to get into one thing before I get into the stats is, with the United States population, it would be significantly more complicated than it would be if you're, looking at a country that has a population.
Well, the thing is, what you could do, what you could do is that have the federal government mandate all the states to individually set up a single payer system or any type of universal system, which would be less complicated.
If you're comparing it to
But
another
where's
nation,
the constitution?
Go ahead.
I guess where's also the constitutional authority for the federal government to do that? Because when we talk policy, we shouldn't also just talk about like the legitimacy of it or the capabilities. We should also talk the legality of it. I mean, the federal government, from my knowledge, there's nothing in Section 1, Article 1, Section 8, really, that kind of gives Congress the power to regulate healthcare in any way, shape, or form.
Well, there's nothing saying they can't.
Well,
I mean, that's like saying, that's like saying there's no law saying I can't kill a person while I'm naked. It's still
yeah.
illegal.
It says you can't murder, but it doesn't go to the degree of what you can and can't do. I mean, you can't say it doesn't say it. If there's no.
Well, okay.
It says
providing healthcare to people that can prevent death is different from actually killing someone.
Well,
so really
let me go into the 10th Amendment.
The
10th Amendment says anything that's not. It basically states in the 10th Amendment anything that's not discussed or talked about in the Constitution for the federal government to do is immediately driven back to the states. So it's really up to the states to decide if they want to do a single payer system or not whether or not a government should mandate it.
Panda's triggered. And also, before we get too far off topic, I do have some stats for wait time that I would like to share. Particularly one from Medicaid, which is basically government involvement.
Yeah, they do have long wait times for Medicaid, I've heard.
I do have a government accountability office. 9.4% of Medicaid beneficiaries have had trouble obtaining necessary care due to long wait times versus only 4.2% with private. health insurance. And I also have some studies here with countries with universal right to healthcare having longer wait times. In 2013, the average wait time to see a specialist in Canada was 8.6 weeks.
Well, a whole
5 days in the United States, and then in the United States,
well, out of a lot of
fewer than
out of a
10%
lot
of
of
patients wait more than 2 months to see a specialist, versus 41%
hold on, I have
Norway,
something on
34%
specialists.
Canada, 31%
Okay.
Norway, and
So,
20% France.
Well, okay, so I have wait times for specialist appointments on here, and now there's a lot of now the U.S. is one of the better ones on here, but there's still the U.K. and Switzerland that doing better. So here's one for less than 4 weeks. So 80% of people in the U.K. and Switzerland can get an appointment for a specialist in less than 4 weeks, whereas only 76 in the U.S. And then there's a lot of other countries that are doing worse in the U.S. So in that respect, the U.S. is one of the better ones, but still not the best. And then there's also one for getting 2 months or more, which the U.S. is still one of the better ones, but not the best.
And I think also when you look at that, you do have to take into consideration with a very small population, it would be much easier, as well as obviously when you look at the spending. I mean, the Nordic nations are sitting on one of the largest oil refineries in the world, which also helps a lot. And then also the fact that they are a smaller, more condensed population.
Well, that's why I would suggest to have the federal government mandate that individual states to set up one, so it won't be super complicated.
Well, I mean, for example, there's Nordic nations, their entire population is less that than Los Angeles.
Yeah, I know. But like the United Kingdom, which has 65 million people, so it's a lot bigger, and in a lot of cases they have shorter wait times in the US.
And they do break it up in the UK as well, so that does make it a little.
Well, yeah, that's why I would say the break it up instead of have just one big thing that could just collapse any minute.
So the
have a lot more
government
smaller
isn't
things.
really involved in healthcare in your mind. It would be the states doing it.
Well, yeah, just some kind of like Canada kind of does this too, where it's more of a provincial.
So
I'm from Canada, obviously. It's
right.
from more of a provincial decision where the provinces really make spending decisions.
So where are the states going to really get that money? Because like corporate tax act usually is a federal government that goes under their jurisdiction.
Well, look, it depends how you do it. No, I'm not it could be anyways. It could just be the government to raise, let's say, federal income tax and give the fund to the states, or the government could mandate them to raise their own income taxes. Collect the funding.
We can kind of get into taxes too, if you
I know, what was it? I think the New York State Assembly passed the Medicare for All system, and I guess you can read through that bill, see how they're doing it.
Yeah, I think that's still pretty new for the most part. I guess we might as well get into taxes while we're here.
Okay.
One thing that in Europe, a lot of what they do is they increase payroll taxes. And
wait, what's payroll tax exactly?
Payroll tax, that's what you basically pay for employer, like when you hire somebody, right?
Okay.
So the more people you hire, the more you have to pay. The concept is if you're hiring more people, you're bigger, but it also discourages hiring. In European countries, the average payroll tax is 37% compared to 15.3% in the United States. And according to Paul R. Gregory, who has a PhD and a research fellowship and a fellow at the Harvard Institution, financing a universal healthcare right in the United States would call payroll taxes to at least double. So I think that would discourage a lot of hiring as well, which I think that would be a negative impact on the economy that should be taken into consideration. And there's other ways to do it. You don't have to necessarily do payroll tax. That's what they do in Europe. If you wanted to model them.
Europe seems pretty good now. Well, other than maybe some terrorism, but I think if they manage to do it, same if within Canada, I'm pretty sure the U.S. can do it. Well, maybe without raising payroll tax too much, and maybe more so income tax, but.
Okay, so you want to do it on an income tax?
Well, partly, yes.
Okay, so you want to do it on a mixture of things.
I would also like to do it as in going for offshore tax shelters.
Okay, I have a question for you guys, okay?
For who?
For all of you.
Okay.
So you know how some, Planned Parenthood, right? It was getting funded by U.S. taxes.
Yep.
Do you think you should be able to opt out or in? Opt out if you don't want it.
What do you mean?
If you don't want to fund a certain organization, should you would you want a Like he could choose if he wanted to do it or not.
I really don't know. Well, I'm just gonna specify. I want to state something here. Now, I assume you bring this up because you don't like the idea that Planned Parenthood does abortion. I assume. I'm just assuming that.
1 second.
I just want to let you know that the Hyde Amendment prohibits any funding going to abortion. So,
Yeah.
so no federal tax dollars actually goes to the abortion that Planned Parenthood does, and it's also plus.
No, I'm just saying
of what they do.
Yeah, I'm just saying. Do you like? Hold up. Do you think people should have the options to opt out of whatever they don't want to choose to
Should they
fund?
have to pay for public schools?
No.
Although I think they opt out to pay
Like maybe for
taxes.
some things, but for others, no.
Okay.
As
So you
someone who's against like taxes on pretty much a whole scale level, especially income taxes, I don't think you should be able to opt out because it defeats the purpose of taxes. Like if anyone and everyone can opt out, even to the smallest things,
Basically charity.
like it's basically charity.
Yeah.
So if you want to have an opt out ability, government run it. Just have it send it to the private sector if you want an opt out ability.
Can I ask you another question regarding healthcare?
Me?
Yes.
Sure.
Do you see any potential issue with doctor shortages at all, or?
I really don't know about that. I would have to do some research on other countries with a single payer system about doctor shortages. So as of now, I can't really answer that question.
I do have a
care.
Oh.
Just really quick, and then I can let you kind of go ahead and give your 2 cents. So the Association of American Medical. Oops. Can you hear me?
No, we can hear.
Sorry. The Association of American Medical Colleges predict a shortfall of about 63,000 doctors, basically because of the influx of Obamacare is what they've predicted it to be. And then if you also look, there is a study done by the British National Health Service that found they were critically short of doctors and nurses. And they had 2.71 practicing doctors for every 1,000 people, which I believe could also get into the average pay of doctors. I don't know if you want to get into that right now, but I think the fact that doctors make less in those countries, have a
don't doctors make more in Canada than the U.S.? Because I don't really have stats, but I've heard they have. But I don't really have
30% less in Canada, and in the United Kingdom, they earn 50% less. Those are the 2 places I had. Which obviously, if doctors are making,
I'm pretty sure in the UK, they capped how much nurses can make. Like really, I don't really know what I'm talking about. I've just vaguely heard some things. I really need to do more research on this, but recently I've mainly been doing research on actual wait times, not really doctor storages or pay.
And then question for you: you think that government essentially can help control the costs of healthcare, but do you really think in the long term a single payer will? Because when you kind of regulate the market to the point of as high of regulations,
well, it's not really going to be a market.
That's my point. Is that in anything kind of government ran or anything that government has such a hand in, costs generally continue to go up without much efficacy towards. Because you take it like the grant system, for example. Every time the government increases grants by let's say 5%, the education system goes, okay, we're going to raise costs by 5% now. So it's like this sort of like spiraling thing, especially in a country as big as the United States.
In a single payer system, it would just be the government would be the single insurer.
Yeah,
no,
it's the only one. There's not like a private so much.
Yeah, like I would say private insurance should be still an option for, let's say, those that want even better care than what the government can.
That's more universal healthcare, though.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, how does? Okay.
And then there's like other types like insurance mandate, where it's just the government forces you to buy insurance. But
so I don't know if you want to go ahead and touch on. I know you mentioned one of the ways you wanted to pay through it was through taxation, taxing the wealthy, and so on. And also, you mentioned income inequality being a factor.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know if you wanted me to kind of go ahead and tell us a little bit about your stance on income inequality, as well as your solutions, and kind of just what you think in general.
Well, okay. Well, I don't really have any stats on the issue itself. Right with me right now, but I've read some on it, and it seems to be a big issue, and it's been getting worse since the 80s.
So, what's the issue
Where
with
so much
income
more.
inequality?
Well, too much wealth going into the hands of too little, and the problem with it is that the poor middle class not having enough spending power.
What's your opinion on basketball inequality?
Hmm?
Basketball inequality. You know, it's mostly like really tall, athletic people that can put a basketball.
I don't really know. I don't understand what you're saying.
Basically, what I'm saying is inequality is a product of natural biology and hierarchy, and whether it be something such as height or IQ, genetics, environment that you're put in, that could
Okay.
have changed you. That's the product of income inequality, and I don't believe, even if you found that to be inherently immoral, I don't think what you're kind of referring to is a tax. Sorry, my phone keeps going out, I guess. So even if you did argue that it was immoral, I'm not really sure taxation would help. I do have some sources here if you're interested. I have a congressional budget report which found that the top 40% of wage earners in America paid 106% of taxes. The bottom 40% paid negative 9%, which was on table 3, page 13. I have a 2014 tax return. Overall, 149 million taxpayers filed a tax return in 2014. After adjusting for credit and deduction, 52 million filers, which is about 35% of the total, had no income tax liability, or the remaining 97 million paid nearly 1.3 trillion in income taxes. So I don't think just taxing them is necessarily going to fix the natural hierarchy of it.
Well, I know in terms of other countries, like mainly North, okay, I was reading this website and it was grading countries on income inequality, and many Nordic countries such as Sweden and Denmark had an A on this, and they have pretty high taxes on the wealthy, got public health care, public education, and then other countries had B's. Canada had a C, and the U.S. dead last with it. Didn't really have public health care or
I think it's
tuition
a
free
little
college
interesting.
University.
Because the United States actually has a higher corporate tax rate than those nations. In fact, we still do have the highest in the world.
Well, the thing is, the 35% isn't exactly effective. Like, a lot of times corporations don't pay that. They end up paying something lower.
I mean, I don't think there's really any way to objectively measure how much
The
people are escaping taxes.
Yeah, because I mean, you're talking also the corporate
really
tax rate.
Well, I'm really talking about more of individual income tax. I know.
Well, that's not where most of our stuff comes from. It's not it's individual. Like, that's 1/3 of our budget. So you still have like the corporate tax rate or the corporate tax rate that brings in a lot. You have sales tax, like those types of taxes. Like, you can't just exclusive.
So Sweden's highest tax rate is 57.1%.
And what's that tax rate on?
Well, I'm just reading that's the highest tax rate. I'm not. I'm just looking. I'm just looking at it right now. I need to figure out. I'll just look up their tax rate, their tax brackets.
So while you're doing that, what's wrong with kind of the inequality in general, not just with wealth, but with anything that we accept within reality? Did you hear me? I'm sorry, my mic keeps going weird.
Yeah, I heard you.
Like, why is it bad that LeBron is so much better at basketball than I am? Why is it bad that
Einstein
it's not
necessarily a bad thing. Well, it's kind of different in a sense. Whereas with
I mean, is it really fair that Einstein is so much more intelligent than I was, or Stephen Hawking's way more intelligent than I am?
Well, the problem...
That's inequality of IQ.
Well, okay. The problem with...
And I would
quality
also
or
argue
Look, I need to really, well, I probably need more time to think of this.
I would also
think
argue
about that.
IQ is a big reason, is a big indication of wealth. For example, there's a lot of people that would win the lottery, and because they simply are not smart enough with money, you could call it IQ, whatever you would like, they simply are not able to hold on to it, even though they have, you know, a $30 million head start on the rest of us. They still aren't able to hold on to it. I would say that's a natural product of biology. To while some people, there was one, he's one of the wealthiest men in the world. He's from England. He was homeless. He was sleeping in, you know, on the streets. And then like 5 years later, he had one of the most successful businesses in the world. He's worth, you know, tens of billions of dollars. So I would say that's an example of intelligence. I mean, you know, my example, I know this is anecdotal, but I didn't really have a whole lot of money for college, but I was able to get scholarships through, you know, not necessarily just because I was so smart, also hard work. You know, I studied a lot. And because of that, something that really wasn't feasible for me, you know, became feasible. And I don't think you could redistribute, you know, IQ, work ethic, genetics, etc. You could only, all you can redistribute is a product of those things. So that's just kind of my opinion. I didn't know if you wanted to go ahead and say anything real quick. I do have some more stats, though, if you would like to read. I have the federal government, CBO. Between 2007 and 2009, the top 1% paid 22.7% of all taxes. The top 10% paid 50% of all taxes. The top 20% paid 65.3% of all taxes. The top 40% paid 84.3% of all taxes. The bottom 20% paid just 1.1% of all taxes. So it's disproportionately taking wealth from wealthy, and the idea is whether it goes to education or we redistribute it, going to the other people, all you're giving them is the byproduct of what they already have, and you're not really redistributing what made them successful. Otherwise, we wouldn't have poor people. If we could redistribute somehow, IQ, we would all just be average, smart, medium income, you know, whatever. But because we can't do that, there is still income inequality. I don't think that'll really ever change throughout human history. Would you like to move on to the other topic? I don't remember what it was, but
foreign policy.
Okay, sure. We can hit on foreign policy. Do you want to give your opinion?
My opinion, or the
whoever.
Face.
Whoever, I don't mind either way.
Well, personally, I was very pro-Trump when it came to his speeches, but not his actions. I'm more of the school of Ron Paul is that we should take a non-interventionist approach in most cases. I don't think intervention does a lot for our country in terms of like wealth and creating any of that. It also creates such bad relationships with other countries that we almost have a reputation that is just warmongering. It's just perpetual warfare where you're killing people because other people killed people, and it doesn't really teach anyone a lesson. Like when we bombed Syria, for example, you know, we struck Syria to, you know, kind of slap Assad, killing people, and he got disconnected. That's what happened.
Something went wrong.
But we slapped Assad's hand.
What are we on now?
We're on foreign policy.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Hands for killing civilians, and then our missile strikes killed civilians as well. So we do it in such a way that doesn't help national security. It doesn't help national sovereignty as a whole for other people.
So with the Syria situation, it is definitely a complicated issue because I don't think Assad should be taken out of power. I don't want another Iraq war, for example.
Yeah, where the creative vacuum and led to the formation of ISIS.
Well, my opinion is if you overthrow government, I think you're responsible to kind of protect the people due to the lack of the government they have, and I don't think the United States should take up that responsibility. And then on the same note, he did gas his own. I don't know what happened. He did, gas his own people, and he is not the nicest guy in the world. So it is a weird balancing act. I wasn't really. A lot of people were, saying it's World War III when we hit the airbase. Obviously, it wasn't, and I thought that was a little over.
We got lucky because Putin is a very smart politician and didn't retaliate.
Well, why would he?
Well,
because
we're striking his ally. Yeah, imagine if South Korea,
Well, if Putin struck South Korea, the issue with that would be retaliation with a nuclear superpower. Now, if he did attack Syria, there's not like a dictator in South Korea or anything like that, or they're not killing their own people. But if he just did it for no reason, I think it's a little different. If South Korea was killing their own people and then Russia hit one of their air bases they were using to use chemical weapons, I don't think the United States would go to war with them because it would be mutual destruction. I do agree it's a balancing act, though.
I mean, and we don't have to get into it too much, but in regards to the gas attack, Assad denied full responsibility of that, and it didn't make sense in the time. Personally, I don't believe he gassed his own citizens. So something happened, and I don't know what, so I can't attest to what happened, but it makes no sense. It's like, for one, it was on the eve of peace talks. Two, he was winning the war. Three, Trump literally said he can stay in office. We don't really care anymore. That's fine. What would he gain? That would literally only harm people, especially with the media on it. It just seems too coincidental, in my opinion. So I don't necessarily know that it was that actually happened. But even if it did, it still wasn't our point in. It's not a war, because only striking only hurts us more than it will hurt Syria. It will hurt us because it'll only bring us into involvement. Just because we're lucky because Trump has a very is not very pro-war right now. So, but if it was anyone else,
he just did weapons on Arabia.
So with the Syria thing, I do believe Assad did do it. One of the things that I think is probably one of the more convincing evidence is the fact that the witnesses reported it was Syrian planes. I don't think the rebels really could have realistically got their hands on it. And then also, the hospital where the victims were being treated also did get hit. Which I don't think you would randomly attack a hospital unless you try to do damage to your victims.
I mean, there's a history of false flag attacks, reputable ones. I mean, obviously get past the conspiracy theory of everything's a false flag attack, but there are very many reputable ones to pull us into.
Vietnam.
Correct. I mean, you have Gulf of Tonkin. You have the WMDs for Iraq. We didn't attack Saudi Arabia. We attacked Iraq because there's so much geopolitical politics kind of involved with the war that we're fighting for interest groups, because the oil pipeline that Russia wants is going to go to Russia, versus the oil pipeline that we want is going to go to Saudi Arabia. So it's like.
So I would agree with you with Vietnam and what happened in the Gulf, but that was eventually declassified. Like the government even admitted to it. So like.
Admit to what?
The Gulf of Tonkin, they bombed themselves.
They basically showed that they weren't being attacked. And if that sort of evidence is released for Syria, then so be it. And they have done it before. As for Iraq, they didn't technically find any weapons of mass destruction. They did find yellow cake uranium, though, which it is used as chemical weapons. Was Saddam really a threat to the world? Not really. He wasn't a good guy. Nasty dictator. I don't think we should have toppled him. I think Iraq became way more unstable.
Yes.
I don't know if I would say it's so much a false flag, though.
It also cost a lot of money.
It did cost a lot of money. I agree. I don't agree
Seven.
with
I
the
think
Iraq
it's
War.
7 trillion. Well, once you account for interest.
I don't agree with the Iraq War. I absolutely agree. I don't think it was worth it.
It's just that those are the types of wars we always get brought into, are perpetual wars. We haven't had a break, and intervention, like I said, it only hurts national security. I mean, every time you kill someone, you create an enemy via their family, all these sorts of things. And if you really want to talk about income inequality, let's get down to war. War harms the poor on all sides more than it harms anyone else, and it funds the rich people. I mean, you have what is it, Halliburton? You have Boeing. They make so much money off of war. So if anything, war is just this profiteering they have going on, and they justify it with these little things that the United States honestly does as well. I mean, napalm, Agent Orange killed so many Vietnamese people. How can we really sit there on Mount Moralism and say, hey, Assad, you shouldn't do that just because we did it doesn't mean you should too, and we're going to bomb you for doing it, sort of thing.
I agree with that, especially with some of the tactics the United States had. I would probably also say you could also flip that around and say just because we did it doesn't justify Assad or whatever dictator does whatever to their people. But how about we talk a little bit about previous conflicts we've been in? We'll see if we agree. The first one that I do agree with was World War II. Do we agree that was?
Well, obviously. Well, the U.S. didn't even get involved until they were attacked by Japan.
Yes. Do we agree that
So
war
it's
was justified?
Yeah, it was totally
Well,
justified.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, Roosevelt wanted to get in that war anyway, so he ignored warnings. But yes, it was justified.
Roosevelt just waited until they were actually attacked, and then once they got into the war.
But
Yeah.
Regardless, we agree the actual conflict, it was
100%.
kind of important.
Yeah.
Yes.
I agree. The other conflict I would agree with, which is where I think we may get some debate, would be the Korean War. I was curious.
Generally, I really don't know much about the Korean War, so I can't really make it.
Now you could also argue that there was bad policies prior, like we didn't allow South Korea to really defend themselves with the military. Because we were afraid at the time that South Korea would attack North Korea, or what was the communist section, and we didn't want to get drug into war, so we said, okay, you guys can't have a military, and that actually ended up backfiring because the communists invaded South Korea. They had no military, and then I'm sure we're all aware of the brutality of communism.
So why do you support it?
I support it because we did not let them have any sort of military to defend themselves, and because of that, I feel we were somewhat obligated to defend them. And then also,
I would agree with an obligation. I would agree that we had an obligation.
Okay, I get your point.
I would also argue though that we should. I don't know why we wouldn't let our allies have military. I mean, it was a different time. Maybe, if I was alive during that time, I would agree with them. But, in hindsight, it's pretty ridiculous we didn't let South Korea, an ally of ours, build up their own military. In my
opinion. Okay, that makes sense. I get that.
If we're a war, no matter whether or not it's justified, we need to start having more of a declaration of war. We need to, honestly, I think presidents and any sort of intervention whatsoever without congressional declaration of wars or anything like that needs to happen. Because what's happening is that it's accepted that the president can just kind of declare war and does whatever he wants to. The people that are liable for those kinds of things, the Congress people, should have to vote on it. That way we can, hey, this representative voted to go to war and look what happened. So that no one's held accountable because of the Congress benefits and the president benefits. So we need to definitely return sort of a balance back to the government so that we can have checks and balances. Because right now, really, unchecked power.
I definitely like that idea. I guess one concern I would have, for example, when we were attacked with Pearl Harbor, and we went to Congress and we got a declaration of war against Japan, and then Germany declared war on us. That was definitely a good time to get a declaration because it's not like it was a secret. You just bombed, our base. We're going to go after you. I would be slightly concerned though.
I would do you think we could debate Hiroshima and Nagasaki?
Yes.
We can do that later. After the meat and potatoes of the
So I know
subject.
That'd be
something.
pretty
The thing I'm
interesting.
about to say. So the thing I'm about to say, I know it's not political, but who's played GTA 4?
I haven't. I played
I
GTA 5.
have, I don't know.
I haven't.
Because
Maybe a long
the
time
main
ago.
character talks about war. Can I play it real quick? It's 22 seconds long.
Yeah, that's fine.
He talks about war.
Sure.
Sure, play it.
Is where the young and poor is where the young and stupid are tricked by the old and bitter into killing each other. I was very young. I'm very angry. Maybe that is no excuse. Roman?
And then he passes out.
Oh.
But yeah,
So,
I actually kind of
I'll be back
agree
in a
with
minute.
so
Alright.
with the atomic bombings, why don't you just give me your opinion on it? Canadian against Trump.
He said he'll be right back.
Oh, okay.
But
guess we
do
can
you
get
guys
back to
agree
that.
with that?
What's that?
What he said? Sorry for
It was
interrupting you.
It was cutting in and out a little bit. It was kind of difficult.
So I can tell you because it has it on in the description. I'll read it.
Okay.
War is where the young and stupid are tricked by the old and bitter into killing each other.
To an
Yeah,
extent,
Like back
it's pretty
then.
vague.
Like back then.
It's still that way.
Like during the communist time and all that.
It can be. I mean, if you use it as propaganda.
Like for
I guess
other
so.
countries. Because the main character was from somewhere else. I don't remember.
It sounds
Well-
like he's from the Soviet Union. Yeah.
Well, war in general is that way. It's the I mean, if we get down to like brass tacks, you can kind of avoid war through diplomatic relations if people, like, if you didn't have people constantly like egging it on, like if you didn't have the people that are very pro-war, like if you had like kind of eliminated the John McCains of every country, we could kind of reach an agreement if people would want to concede, but they don't. There's too much like pride. There's too much political power at play. And war is profitable. So it's absolutely a trick. War is the biggest salesmanship done by the government.
I do think there's one other factor that you might be leaving out a little bit that could also play a factor. That would also be religion. If you look,
Sure.
for example, the Islamic State. Some people argue they don't adhere to the Quran, but I don't think there's any doubting some of the verses in there that have inspired a lot. So, like, for example, with ISIS, it's not so much they're violent because they want to profit or special interest or anything. It's just a religious war.
No, you're right.
Certainly, you could also argue throughout history, conquering land, that's been the case. I think it's a little different now just because we have the entire world's a lot more organized. People really aren't trying to take over a country and just keep it and then make it.
But yeah, that's still like profit. That's profiting in an indirect way. So you're not getting money for Halliburton wooden ships incorporated, but you're getting resources, labor, things like that. So it's still the whole like greed is what drives war, essentially. Greed pushes war. And
I would probably disagree with that and say it would be more probably religion being the.
Well, religion's a huge part, especially in the Middle East. But when you get down to like the European wars, when you get down to African wars, when you get down to like regional besides Middle East, it's generally kind of based around policies and resources.
I'm Catholic, but like I won't deny there's been a lot of wars for my religion as well. So I do think that you can also kind of point to that as being a factor in mostly Europe. And then also they had a lot of tyrants. They had kings. They had monarchies, which also is not really the most peaceful government you can have. But now that Canadian versus Trump is back, I didn't know if you wanted to tell us your opinion on the dropping of 2 atomic bombs on Japan.
Oh, okay.
Tomorrow, 6. Are you off tomorrow? Oh yeah, you're right.
So who wants to go first on this?
You can
I'll
go
just tell
first.
Yeah, I don't know if you want to explain your situation. I would have supported the 2. Obviously, it's different in hindsight now. But I'll let you kind of explain your reasoning for what you believe.
Well, okay, so I've heard now the reason why Harry Truman decided to drop the 2 atomic bombs was because they estimated that in doing a full invasion of the island would result in more deaths than dropping 2 atomic bombs on the 2 cities. Is that correct?
Yes.
Well, it would have cost more money as well, and it would
you'd
have
be
been a
like,
longer
I mean,
time.
if you're looking at death toll, they're estimated at about a million combined between Japanese and America, I believe. I can look it up, but I'm pretty sure that's where it kind of.
And even if we did invade, I don't think Japan would have surrendered. In fact, after we dropped the 2nd atomic bomb, the only reason they surrendered was because we said we had more of them, even though we didn't. But they thought we had an arsenal of them, and they're like, they just have so many of these. What can we do? It's just going to keep coming. So I don't believe just because we invaded Japan, they would have stopped fighting. I think they would have continued for.
Well, the thing is, my problem with the 2 dropping of these atomic bombs is that I don't believe it's mortal whatsoever. And how much innocent civilians were just attacked, that were killed.
Now, I could be wrong here, but I did hear from a relative that was in the military. They did drop flyers over the cities prior in Japan. I know we've done this in other times. If we ever strike an area, I think we've done it in Vietnam. But they actually airdropped flyers in Japanese that said, "If you want to leave this area, we're going to bomb it." The reason we picked Nagasaki and Hiroshima was because they were industry cities. That's where Japan built a lot of their.
Well, yes, I think I've heard of that, but there were still innocent civilians.
Well, I mean,
that was my problem.
You kind of can't. I mean, that's a cost of war. Like when it comes to a war like that, like that's different than a whole war as like when you drop bombs in Syria or Yemen when you haven't declared war, and then you're killing innocent civilians there. But we're a nation at war with another nation at war. So when you drop the bomb, first off, they attacked us, so there's no remorse in my heart for them. And I'm very anti.
Well, that was really good government, no.
Well, still, I mean, I guarantee you the Japanese have a society of honor. That's the whole Asian culture, and that they I guarantee you, more than 80%. I don't have a number, but I can just based off of cultural things, more than at least half of them supported the government. You have people that would commit if they're
doesn't necessarily mean they deserve to die.
They were lied to by their government to an extent, but you could also make the case that had we invaded, simply the conflict between 2 very powerful militaries would have resulted in civilian death as well.
Well, obviously,
the soldiers.
Like couldn't there be a better way, like maybe cutting them off from the rest of the world?
Well, I mean, if you look, we hit those areas so they couldn't fight us anymore. We basically crippled their military by taking out.
I just like the thing is, I would wish that there was a better option.
Oh, definitely. I wish it was like a utopian where we wouldn't have to kill those people, but
it's just I really have mixed feelings on it. It's just
I wish there would have been an option.
I have problems with more of just morality, and then other problems with just
I mean the kind of in
and then just
I mean
it being costs and just moral of dropping into atomic bombs, just being immortal, and then doing it just being less costly and less deaths.
It wasn't the military. We didn't have an arsenal of atomic weapons at the time.
Well, yeah.
We had to pick 2 spots, and that was it for a while until we made more. So if you have 2 options, you have to pick the most powerful spot.
Well, wasn't it like, because I think I was watching a documentary and they said it was more based on like the weather, and if it was cloudy, they didn't drop the bombs. But if it was pretty clear out, they did.
Whether they talked about that, I don't know. I know that
because I'm pretty sure they would have dropped one on Tokyo if it wasn't so cloudy during the time they were doing this. So I
think they didn't want to drop it on Tokyo because they didn't want to completely.
Well, I think at one point they were talking about it.
Well, of course you're going to talk about it. I mean, Russia probably talked about dropping a nuke on Washington D.C., but they're not going to do it because it's not in the interest of anyone. Because if you bombed Tokyo, you make the emperor and the dictator a martyr, and I mean you make them martyrs, and then
I'll probably learn a lot more about the history of the war in next year in grade 10 once we get to history.
in my opinion, the thing that should be debated in World War II, if we're going to talk about anything, is the Nuremberg trials more than the atomic bomb. The atomic bomb is cut and dry. I mean, you have the rape and massacre of Nanking by Japan. I mean, I get it was the civilians that got killed, but in the end, the similar to a store, the soldier in the government is a representation of the Japanese peoples and ideals, and therefore Japan. 200,000 deaths related, or 300,000 maybe, to the atomic bomb. I don't know the exact figures off the top of the numb, but hold on, guys, I'll be right back.
I'll end real quick because I have to leave soon, but I'll end real quick just by saying that in a perfect world, it wouldn't have been needed. In a perfect world, World War II wouldn't even happen. Unfortunately, we don't live in a perfect world. I mean, we had the Nazis and the Holocaust. We had Japan and the crimes that they committed. So in an unperfect world, you're going to have decisions which aren't ideal. It's not going to be utopian. Ideally, we could have ended the war without anyone dying. But the unfortunate reality of this situation is people die.
Well, can I ask you a question?
Go for it.
Would you consider dropping the 2 atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki? Would you consider that genocide?
No, because you're not targeting a specific race.
Well, you're still targeting people, though. What is not just the government, though? Wouldn't that still technically be genocide?
Would you consider it genocide when, for example, the United States fought the British? Because we were targeting the British?
Well,
real quick, what are we on?
I thought genocide is just when you target a group of people when it's not necessarily, let's say that's under a certain government, but they're not actually fighting in this said war.
I'm not sure this. I know when you look at genocide, there's like 7 factors, and one of the factors is you'll end up denying. You'll end up saying it didn't happen, or whatever.
Genocide.
Yeah, the World Genocide Watch List, dogs or something. They have like 7 things they look for.
Genocide.
And to my knowledge, the dropping of the atomic bombs don't really match that. If the United States lied about nuking Japan.
Okay, so according to this, the deliberate killing of a group of people, especially those of a particular ethnic group or nation. So you can say that could apply to the Japanese.
I mean, you could say the same thing then if you're killing soldiers. I mean, genocide would be more so like.
The thing with killing soldiers, the soldiers can defend themselves with guns, but general citizens can't really. They can't really defend themselves. They can't really defend themselves from just a bomb that just came from the sky and exploding.
I mean, genocide would be more taking those same 300, whatever the amount is, killed by the atomic bomb, rounding them up into a camp and then just executing them. And that's more of a genocide than dropping a bomb when they were given a warning. They were told to surrender, or imminent doom will happen, and they chose.
Well, that was just the government that was told to surrender, not really.
The government is a representative of the people. So if the people were.
During that time, Japan had a fascist government. They abolished democracy, so they don't really represent the people.
Technically,
they were initially voted in, but. For a while, they didn't.
If you're kind of using that definition, then almost anything could be mentioned as genocide. And I don't think the intent was. I don't think if we wanted to kill as many Japanese as we could, we wouldn't.
Kyoto and Tokyo.
Yeah,
Kyoto and Tokyo would be just massacred then.
We wouldn't have told them. We would have just done it. We hit those areas to cripple their military.
And if I honestly think that if we had bombed Tokyo and Kyoto, I'd be on your side right now. But we didn't. We chose sparse cities and we're given warnings and things like that. So in my opinion, it's not a genocide because of that exclusive reason.
If I were, let's say, Harry Truman at the time, I probably would have stalled on doing that for a while longer than
Why?
They've
drawn you into
it would probably take me a lot longer to decide.
Well, it didn't happen overnight, but if you waited 2 years...
There's no
that's a
stalling on something that they could rebuild by that time.
They wanted to end the war, and at the time, it's a little different than it is now, where troops kind of get R&R. Back then, once you went in the military, you didn't come home until the war was over. So, I mean, do you still really want those people over halfway across the world for 2 more years, or do you want them to just come home to their family? If you really
that would be a part of the decision process.
there's only two ways to win the war, and that was either dropping the atomic bomb or invading Japan. So if you invaded Japan, you would have killed so many more Americans and so many more Japanese, because you wouldn't be dropping atomic bombs, you'd be dropping regular bombs from your carriers. Then you'd have artillery strikes, then you'd have regular gunfires door to door, more casualties in the whole grand scheme of things. That would be a genocide. That'd be an unnecessary killing of Americans and of Japanese. So I mean, there's two ways, and we chose. Yeah.
We have 5 more minutes, then we have to end it.
All right, I just want to end on one last point, if that's okay.
Okay, then I'm gonna leave.
Yeah. Yeah, at the time, we didn't really have much options to go. We picked 2 places to cripple their military. And not only, I mean, you mentioned the amount of people that would die, and I would absolutely agree with that. But one thing I would also add to that is the economic. I mean, at the time, I don't even think we were out of the Depression at that time.
Well, I think we're significantly recovering, though.
I think we were in the process of recovering, you're right. But at the time, do you really want to spend, however much money it would take to occupy Japan, to invade Japan, the military, right after we're out of a depression? And if you look after World War II, yeah, every other economy was destroyed, but the United States economy was
booming
very well. Yeah, so you might lose that really good economy. A lot of people were lifted out of poverty around that time. You had so many people in poverty after the Great Depression.
Yeah.
It dropped like a rock, So I think there's a lot of factors. I think it would have done actually more harm than good to invade. So that's just my last point. I'm going to go ahead and I got to go, but it was a pleasure talking to all of you.
We can continue this another day.
Yeah.
I enjoy talking to all of you. It was a lot of fun. So
right.
thank you guys.
Yeah.
No
all right.
problem.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay, how do I leave this? What do I click? Okay, the end.